Talk to him.
Birdie. Birdie.
I'm going to go around and let him see me.
And so you create another dilemma that should exist. So then you have to.
Yeah.
Birdie.
Now you got a whole other level that needs to be managed.
Right.
You know, and that's true. I mean, I told that mom in the hospital the day that he's quit going 100 years ago.
Pretty bird. Birdie.
Unfortunately, he would be
You did my birdie.
Do it again.
Birdie.
Technology.
He won't do it.
He was doing it real good.
He's kind of wondering what's going on.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel again today. Now in today's video, it's kind of a throwback Thursday sort of a video, which I realize this is not on a Thursday that I'm posting this, but I have recently found myself in the last couple of years maybe thinking, going back in my past and remembering my childhood, things that I did growing up, things that my family did together growing up. I'm just kind of basking in the memories of stuff that were good, things that were good during my childhood. So I have written down here a list of some things that I remember from my childhood, and that's what I want to talk about with you today. Some of these may be things that you had as part of your childhood too. The first one that I want to talk about is my mama's shadow box. Now this was an item I think that was popular in the 50s and 60s, and we had one hung on the wall behind our couch, and it holds small little trinkety things. My mama collected salt and pepper shakers, and that's what was on it, along with other little glass figurines of probably animals, dogs and cats and little people. But my mama didn't do very much dusting, a lot like me. I don't dust regularly like I should, really. So when it came time to dust the shadow box, one of us kids got picked, and I always felt very privileged when I got picked to dust the shadow box, because I got to get up on the couch in my feet, my bare feet, and remove all the items off the shelf and lay them on the couch. Now, the items that were too high up for me to reach, my mama would have to get those down. And then you would take a cloth with some dusting spray, wipe off the shelves and around the outside of the shadow box. It was made out of wood. So you would wipe that down, and then mama would dust the top part because we couldn't reach that. Then you would get Windex and spray and then wipe off the mirror, because it actually had a mirror. It was a box with shelves with a mirror on it that faced out and reflected the back of whatever you had on there. Then you would take each of the little items and dust them off and put them back up on the shelf. And that's something I think about a lot as a child, as my childhood was getting to clean my mama's shadow box, because that was really a big event in my life. To me, it was. And the second thing I remember is, those of you who've been on my channel for a while know that I've lived back and forth between California and Missouri. I'm in Missouri now, but at one time during my childhood when I was in California, we used to go to a place that was called Pacific Ocean Park. We called it POP. And it was an amusement park where they had rides and games and food booths and entertainment there. My daddy would take us there. He would pay for us to get in, and he'd turn us loose and say, y'all take off and meet your mama and me back here, you know, such and such a spot at a certain time. And we would just run wild through the Pacific Ocean Park. Now, I don't even know if it's still there. It was on the Pacific Ocean. It actually sat right on the coastline of the Pacific Ocean. And I just remember some very happy times of my family getting to go to POP, because we always called it POP. We never called it Pacific Ocean Park. It was POP. And the second thing, I've talked about this before, is my mama ironing our clothes. Back when I grew up, everything was probably 100% cotton. There wasn't any such thing as permanent press. So anytime Mama did a load of clothes, when she took it out, she had to iron everything. And that included my dad's work shirts, her dresses, and our little dresses and pants and things that we wore. And I remember she had a bottle, like a soda bottle with a sprinkler thing on it, that she would sprinkle water on the item before she ironed it, because she didn't have a steam iron. So that kind of made it, wet, so that when she ironed it with that hot iron, it would steam press it. And she would iron all the things and hang them up, on a door facing or a frame or something, until she could take them and put them in the closets where they belonged. And the next thing that I remember is when my mom baked, pretty much everything she did was made from scratch. Now, I remember her making a lot of cakes and desserts from scratch, because my daddy was one of those type of people. He felt like a meal was not a meal until you had a dessert with it. So Mama made sure that every meal had some kind of a dessert. Now, my daddy's favorite thing was carrot cake. And my mama would actually take the carrots and grate them up, mix the flour and the sugar and the eggs and the milk and everything from scratch to bake a carrot cake for my daddy. And I think if I remember, she put cream cheese icing on it. And those carrot cakes were the yummiest carrot cakes I've ever had. We didn't have box cakes back then, so you had to make them from scratch when you make them. Nowadays, people grab the box shelf, off the store, and that's how they make their cakes. Another thing I remember about my childhood was my mama was a member of TOPS. For those of you not familiar with TOPS, it stands for Take Off Pounds Sensibly. And I can remember as a child, I think their meetings was on Monday nights. My mama didn't drive, so one of the ladies from the TOPS would come and pick her up, take her to her TOPS meeting, and bring her home. And she'd be dieting through the weeks. So when she'd come in, us kids would always say, "Mama, did you lose any?" And she'd lose, "Okay, I lost 3/4 of a pound, or I lost 1.5 pounds. I didn't lose anything." Some weeks she didn't. And they had this thing at TOPS where they would have secret pals. And each month, I think it was once a month they did it, I'm pretty sure, they would take a gift in and exchange it to give to, they would write who it was to, but they didn't put their name on it. And it would be put somewhere in there. And then at the end of the meeting, they would hand those gifts out. And I remember my mom telling us one time that the lady that picked her up was her secret pal. And she was like, "I don't know how I'm going to get this gift in there without her seeing it," because she was riding in with a lady. Maybe it was small enough where she could put it in her purse, and kind of hide it from her. But I remember her bringing home bottles of perfume from her TOPS meeting, because she would let us girls try a little bit of it on our neck, or on our wrist or whatever. And she brought in other things like little trinkets to sit around the house and to put on a shadow box and stuff like that. And another thing that I remember from my childhood that I don't even think this exists at all today was bakery trucks. Well, these drove around in the neighborhood. We lived in a suburb that had, I think it's called a cul-de-sac, where there's not an outlet at the end. You have to actually go down and then circle back around and come out. But the bread trucks would ride through there. And I don't remember if they had music playing or if they rang a bell or something to signal that they were out there. And then you could go out and, wave them down, stop, stop. And they would open the back doors. It was a truck that had the doors that opened like this. And then there was like a little case there that had drawers that pulled out. And like this drawer would have cookies, this one would have pies, this one would have donuts, this one would have cupcakes. And you would tell him what you were looking for. And he would pull out the drawer that had whatever you were looking for. And then you could look in there like this, pick out, I want that blue one. I'll take that yellow cupcake. I want a dozen of these cookies. And they would box it up for you and take your money right there. Now, I've never seen a bakery truck since then. This happened also in California. And another kind of a company that we had that went around then was called Jewelie. I'm not really sure how that's spelled. I have spelled it Jewelt. But it was also a truck that rode around the neighborhood and sold things to housewives. And I'm not really sure exactly what all it sold. It sold food items, I'm pretty sure, but there was other items I think that they could sell too, like silverware, pots and pans, paper plates, jewelry. I think they just carried an assortment of different items on that truck. And, you know, if you wanted something, you could go out and stop the Jewelie truck and see if they had what you needed. Or, you know, just if you just wanted to look and see if there might be something you wanted. I've never heard of that company since. I do remember it from my childhood. And any of my sisters that are watching this, I say sisters because my brothers were probably too young to remember this. But if you remember the Jewelie truck, leave me a comment down below and let me know if you remember what kind of things they sold on that truck, because it's kind of foggy in my mind. Another thing that I remember, this was a big deal when I was a kid. I'm telling you, big deal. This took place in Missouri, and it was when we would go to visit my grandma, and I think we even were living with them at the time. And there was a little town down there called Hornersville, Missouri, and there was a little bitty mom and pop grocery store. And every so once in a while, Grandpa would say, "Come on, kids, we're going to go down to," or maybe it was called Scobeyville. I can't remember, but we would get in my grandpa's truck, and he would drive us down there, and we got to get soda pops and candy. And this was when they had the sodas in the bottle, and they were in this cooler that sat on the ground, and you would pick out the soda you want, and you had to slide it through the slot down to the end and then pull it out. And Grandpa would take us down there, and he would let us pick out like a lollipop or licorice stick or something like that, and we got to have, or a cookie or cupcake or whatever they had, and we got to have a soda pop. And then he would sit there and chew his tobacco. My grandpa chewed tobacco and talk with the other men and the other people that were in the store. A lot of old men went down there and just sat out front on these benches and just talked. And my grandpa went down there to be social, and he took us kids along so that we could have a little bit of a treat. Another thing that I remember was my mama giving us home perms and haircuts. Now, I did a video on my channel once where I showed a photograph that was taken of us kids. It was the 4 older girls and my younger brother. It was just 5 kids at that time. I have 9 altogether in my family, but there was only 5 of us that were born at that time. And in that picture, I remember I pointed out to you to take note of our bangs, because my mama used to cut our hair and she cut our bangs. And I don't know how she did it or what kind of scissors she used, but she never got them straight. They were jagged. Some of them were cut, like mine in that picture. They were cut. My bangs were cut way up at the top of my forehead. But most of the time they were just jagged. They weren't even cut straight. But my mom used to cut our hair. She used to give us home perms. She used to put our hair up in rollers before we went to bed. Sometimes she would do the pin curls. That's where you take the hair and roll it around the finger, and then you press it against their head, and you stick 2 bobby pins in there in an X shape all over their head. And they sleep in that, and then the next morning when you take the bobby pins out, they've got little ringlets. My mama did either the rollers or the pin curls on all of us girls' hair. Now think about that in the morning, getting kids ready for school. You've got 4 daughters that you've rolled their hair. You've got 4 daughters that you've rolled their hair. You've rolled their hair the night before, and you take all that stuff out and brush their hair out the next day before you send them off to school. That's how dedicated my mama was to making us girls presentable for school. Now, this next thing right here is something that's pretty much gone the bye-bye, that nobody does it anymore that I know of. And it was when we were little girls, we always wore dresses or skirts and blouses to school. You did not see little girls in pants. And I forget about what age that stopped, but I do remember when I was in high school and the mini skirt became a very popular item, I did wear that mini skirt to school. And looking back on it now, I'm thinking, how in the world did I keep that little tiny short skirt to cover my bottom? But I remember wearing the mini skirts, and we wore dresses to school or skirts and blouses. And the one thing about that stands out in my mind was when we went to school as high school, if your skirt was too short, we had what we called a homeroom, where you went into the homeroom before you went to your main classes, and they gave you instructions or told you what was going on that day. I don't exactly remember now what the reason was for a homeroom, but we had a homeroom. While the girls were in homeroom, they would make us get down on our knees, our hands and knees, and they would take a ruler on the floor and measure the length of your skirt. It had to be so many inches below or above your knee. I mean, if it was way below your knee, they didn't care. They let you wear it. But they would measure how many inches above. And if your hemline didn't fall on the ruler within that number, they would take a piece of crepe paper and staple it along the bottom of your hem. And you had to wear it in school that day. I think they took note of all the girls that they stapled that on, so that when you walked out of there, you couldn't just rip it off. So that the next teacher, when you went into their room, they had to look and make sure you had that crepe paper on your skirt. It was a no-no to wear short. You could wear a mini skirt, but it had to be a certain length of a mini skirt. The next thing that I remember from my childhood was my Uncle Bill's Christmas decorations. Now, my Uncle Bill, who was my favorite uncle growing up, he had this fantastic setup in his yard for Christmas. He took these glue-on patterns or stick-on sticker things and put on plywood. And they were life-size, that he cut out with a jigsaw of Joseph and Mary, the baby Jesus, the three wise men, camels, sheep, goats, pigs, anything other animal that used to be in the manger. And they were, like regular 5 and 6 feet tall characters that he would put in his yard. He built a manger out of wood, a regular sized manger. He put hay on the ground around it so that he could put the laying down cow in the hay and the baby Jesus in his little cradle down there, and Mary and Joseph behind. And then on the very top of his roof, he had the star that the wise men followed. He had one of those up there. He had lights along the eaves of his house, and he played music. He had speakers attached to the outside of his house where he piped Christmas music all during the month of December to go along with this elaborate setup that he had. And I can remember going to my Uncle Bill's house during May and June. He still had those Christmas lights up. And I remember I said something to him about it. I said, you leave your Christmas lights up all year? And he said, yeah, it's always Christmas at the Whalens. Their last name was Whalen. I can still remember him saying that. It's always Christmas at the Whalens. So that's the list of everything that I remember. Not everything. That's just some of the things that I remember from my childhood growing up. My mom and dad took us a lot of places that I never realized was that big of a deal. But now as an adult, I do. Like I've told you in other videos, we got to go to Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm, Pacific Ocean Park, different places like that. And basically probably had a pretty decent childhood. Even though I didn't look at it that way when I was growing up, I thought it was poor. We were broke and never had money to do anything, but we actually did a lot. So that was all I wanted to talk about in this video. I want to thank you guys for coming. Once again, any new subscribers on there? Hey, my name's Vicki. I'm glad you're here. Those of you who've come back, I want to thank you for returning. And remember, everyone, your life is very short. So make it the absolutely best that you can. And y'all come back and see us now any old time. Bye for this one.